Hey, my name's Jonathan Clark, also known as DJ Bolivia, and I'm here with Francis Cormier, Urban Francis. And this video is the last in a series of videos which basically are about a techno project we put together. The track is called Hijack, and it was put together in Ableton Live. And we have all of our Ableton project files available for a free download in my public Dropbox account. You can find them at djbolivia.ca/Dropbox. Anyway, this particular video, what we want to do is explain a little bit about what's going on with the sidechain compression. Now, eventually, the two of us are going to do a couple of very detailed, very complex tutorials about compression and about sidechaining. Don't have time for those right now, unfortunately. They're very, very complex topics. They take quite a while to learn how to do them properly. So, but because we have some sidechaining in this project, we're going to try and give you a fairly brief overview, enough that somebody who's a little bit familiar with Ableton will understand exactly what we're doing here. Okay, so if you don't understand what compression is, well, like I say, it's a pretty complex topic. A lot of people, when they hear about compression, they get the idea that compression makes things louder. Well, it's funny, it doesn't. What compression does is there's going to be several different settings in a compressor, but the main ones basically have to do with a threshold value, which is the basic value above which audio is being affected or effected. Both phrases, both words work. And there's also a ratio. And the ratio tells how much the audio above that threshold is getting squished. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if it's getting squished, that means the highest volumes are going down to a lower volume. So why do people talk about compression making things louder? Well, that's a great question. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Compression by itself does not make things louder. It reduces the volume of that upper part of the audio sample. But quite often when people are compressing, because they don't want to lose that overall top audio level, is after they compress, they put another setting called makeup gain, and the makeup gain brings your squished part of audio back up. So the top of it is kind of where the top was before. So your peak volume may not change. But the difference is, instead of having those big valleys, it's been squished and the bottoms of the valleys have been brought up so that your audio, instead of big fluctuations in volume, you're going to be seeing little fluctuations in volume, and your average volume, RMS, whatever, your average is quite a bit higher. So the perceived sound is going to come up quite a bit if you have that makeup gain. Okay, so that's a nice basic overview of how compression works. Now, sidechaining. The way that sidechaining works is you're taking a signal from somewhere else and you're analyzing that signal coming into the compressor, and the compressor's actions on the audio that you're working with, the compressor's actions are dictated by the energy in that signal that's being fed in. So the signal that's being fed in may have nothing to do with the audio that you're processing. So you don't have to have that extra signal being fed in. You can just set your compressor at very straight, consistent values through the whole track. But if you're bringing in that extra sound signal, sound source, to affect the performance of the compressor, then that is called sidechaining. So imagine this. Imagine that the signal that you're using to come in to affect the processor, imagine that is something that is steady and repeating, like a kick drum. Okay, so if a kick drum is going repetitively through your track, boom, 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 you can set your compressor to turn on at the same time that you get those volume hits from the kick drum. So your compressor can go on, off in time with the kick drum. Boom, boom, boom. On, off, on, off, on, off. And so the reason that you might want to do this is you may not want to have your signal compressed all the time, but you may want to have the signal compressed for very, very brief intervals repeatedly to allow a different sound to come through. So let's say that you've got a piano or a synthesizer that is a constant sound. You can have, and you've also got a kick drum in the background. Well, maybe when that kick drum is playing normally before you add sidechain compression, maybe the kick drum sounds really muddy because it's trying to push through this constant chord sound that's being played by this synthesizer. Okay, if you sidechain compress that synthesizer, you can set it up so that every time your kick drum plays, the volume drops on that synthesizer. And so as the volume drops on the synth, it gives it space for the kick drum to come up through the mix and sound more clear, more audible. There's more clarity. You know, all sorts of things improve. Okay, so quite often the kick drum is the problem. Bringing the kick drum through the mix is the problem. And so quite often sidechain compression works off of your kick drum. So not only are you playing with the kick drum signal that you want to come through the mix, but because you want to have the compression synchronized to when the kick drum's hitting, the kick drum itself is affecting the sidechain. Okay, so that's quite possible and it's quite common. So basically, every time the kick hits, boom, the noise, the energy of the kick turns the compressor on, changing the synthesizer, letting the audio kick come through. Okay, I know that sounds a little confusing. There's another way to set up your sidechain compression. If you don't want to use one of the existing signals in your project to do the guidance for your compressor, then you can set up what are called ghost notes. And so ghost notes might be a bass line, and so you may be using those ghost notes not because you want to hear them in the project, so you actually mute them, so nobody even knows they exist when they're listening to your project. But you're using those ghost notes to provide the energy that goes into the sidechain compressor, tells the compressor how to act. Okay? So if I had, let's say I had a track where I have a synth and there's nothing else playing at the time. For some reason it's just a constant synth. I can use ghost notes, sidechain them, and what'll happen is as the ghost notes are playing, the compressor cuts out volume from my constant synth, so it's like the opposite of extra sound coming out. It's a gap in the sound, and so my synth keeps cutting out, woo, 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 whatever. And so you can have some really, really cool sounds. You know, it's very prevalent in dance music nowadays to have sounds that cut out. Okay? Hopefully that technical explanation made sense. If you didn't understand sidechaining before, hopefully that illustrates things a little bit. Let's take a look at it in a project. Francis, is there anything I should add to that explanation, or do you want to just get right into describing things?
No, it's really good. That covers the theory well, and now I'm going to go through an actual example in our Hijack track using the bass as an example. We set up our ghost track above everything here, and it's this is our sidechain ghost, and it's what's going to be signaling our compressor, which we're going to turn into a sidechain. So right now it's a regular compressor, and then as I press sidechain, it turns into a sidechain compressor. Then as you go down here, it says audio from. So we're going to want to grab the audio signal from our Ghost track. So you click on this, and if you look down the list, we have it named as Sidechain Ghost. So then you click on that.
And just to interrupt, because you don't have the Sidechain Ghost track turned on, it's not going to be audible in the song. We're just using this for a signal.
Signal, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to play a small section of the bass, and this is what we're going to use as our example to our sidechain example. And as you can hear, there is no bass sounding, but if you look at the gain reduction there, it's actually definitely sidechaining because of that GR, gain reduction. Different things that affect the gain reduction are the ratio. Ratio can have a huge effect on how much gain reduction you get. And this would be considered a brick wall. Infinity to 1. But for the bass, I used a ratio of 4 to 1. And then the attack and the release determine when the actual sidechain compressor, when the actual sidechaining starts. So we have it set at 7 milliseconds attack and 7 milliseconds release. And this is, and like the ratio, it's something that's individual to a track. Like you kind of have to fiddle around with it and find out what you think sounds right. And it's so when I found in this track, like the 7 millisecond one, it allowed the bass to kind of move with the beat. And I'll pull down on the threshold so you can really hear the actual ducking going on. So now we're at a distorting level where you can barely hear the sound. So I'm going to Command Z, Control Z to get back to what I chose. Another big effect on the gain reduction is the knee. The knee is how fast it happens, and because it's a bass, then I want the knee to be very, very fast. If I click on this, it's easier to get a visual. But what the knee is this is down to 0 is called a hard knee, and what happens at a hard knee is you don't have any like gradual gain reduction before and after. It only happens right when the signal happens. And it can go up to 18, and you'll actually see visually it'll change. It'll become more gradual, and that represents so this would be all the way up would be considered a soft knee, but for the bass I used a hard knee. And you can't control the dry wet, and this like signal wouldn't be getting ducked at all. So we're gonna play that. I'm gonna play it just with the drums, and that's kind of what I mean. If you really want to hear how it sounds within the track, you do need the drums to be going, even though they're not signaling the sidechain. So I'm gonna pull down on the threshold, and you'll hear it cutting out more and more. And so the trick is like you don't want it to. You have to get it to duck so that the drums not come out, but you don't want it to be noticeable. So obviously right now it's really noticeable, and if I wanted to even it up again, I'd have to really boost up my gain on the track. But it's just a crazy amount of gain reduction. So I'm gonna go Command Z. So right now the threshold's down at 31. So I think I had it at negative 17. Enter. So like you want it to duck, and you want it to help your drums cut through better, but you don't want it to be audible where you're hearing the actual pumping over the drums themselves.
That makes sense. And then there are some types of dance music where the pumping is done intentionally as an effect, as a purposeful thing. Although, like you say, sometimes subtle is the best way to do it. Quite often being subtle to let that.
I think when you use it, if you use it as an effect, especially with the bass, I think a lot of times they put the attack to like almost nothing, and then you get it. It's just really.
Yeah.
Like you can actually hear it's really rhythmic, and you can actually really hear the drums coming through.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of switch. Like, if I make this 25 is kind of a lot. Like when you get up for side chaining, not for compression, but for side chain compression, 25 is kind of a lot. So the bass is really coming through good, but then now you don't have the drums cutting. You can't hear the drums as well as you want. So that's what I'm kind of listening for. I'm listening to the bass and I'm listening to the drums when I'm setting these numbers. I'm trying to say, is that making the drums clearer? Is that making the bass not come through enough? Because like when you take the attack off of that, when you take the attack all the way off, that means that the attack of the bass isn't actually coming through, and you're just it's just cutting right away. So usually, when it's on that much, you are really doing it for the effect of the.
Yeah.
But then you don't get the attack of the bass itself.
It's almost like a teeter-totter. Like when you change one, the other one changes too. So you've got to find that perfect balance between the two of them to make it sound
every
good.
track would be different, especially based on tempo, and every sound that you're using, like the bass or the chords or the vox, like you're gonna adjust it differently.
A couple of things that people might have questions about if they haven't done this before. So I guess if you're using sidechain ghost notes instead of the actual kick, like for example here, you've created the sidechain ghost out of the kick drum, but people will wonder, why didn't you just use the original kick? And the reason is because, you know what, the kick drum may go through almost the entire track, and there may be places where you don't want to be sidechaining off that kick. So another option would be to automate your compressor and turn the compressor off for that portion of the track. But sometimes just the ghost notes are an easier way to play with it.
And I don't always use ghost notes. Sometimes I do use the drums.
Yeah.
Especially in, like, when it's 4 on the floor, ghost notes seem to work the best. But if you're using like a down tempo, dubstep kind of sound, the kicks is not hitting all the time, like not on 4 on the floor. So then sometimes I do use the actual drums themselves to actually to signal the sidechain.
Now, have you ever experimented with having a couple of stock clips, which are just a repeating 4 on the floor kick drum pattern, and bringing those in to use as your ghost notes, and playing with the difference between something that has a really sharp and distinct kick versus a kind of fat and delayed kick?
Yeah, and I think it does have a difference. So the reason why I chose for the sidechain for the ghost notes, I picked the kick in our actual song.
Yeah.
Because then I knew it would actually signal the exact same way the actual kick would.
It would fit perfectly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, that's a pretty good, hopefully that's a pretty good overview for any of you that are watching this. Like I say, this is a very complex topic, and we could probably talk about it for 2 or 3 hours. But
it's really about ear development. Like, develop your ear so you can start hearing what the actual sidechaining is doing. Because at first you're playing with them and you don't really, you see it visually, but you can't really hear it. And everything is subtle. It's always like subtle things.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's all we're going to say about sidechaining. So thanks a lot for listening. If you want to find more about this entire series, visit djbolivia.ca/hijack, and you'll see the blog post with links to our SoundCloud pages, our SoundCloud downloads, the project files on Dropbox, other videos in this series, and all kinds of other information. Okay, so thanks a lot for watching, and good luck with your producing.